By the time a brand plants a tree for your purchase, the CO2 linked to that product is already in the atmosphere. That tiny seedling will not meaningfully absorb carbon for years. It will not finish offsetting today's emissions for well over a decade. That is where the entire tree planting model starts to break down, because some companies are not reducing emissions. They are just borrowing against the future. I'm Antoni from EcoDrift. We are an award-winning, sustainability-first commercial cleaning company with over 14 years of experience managing hundreds of facilities in the south of the UK. I have spent that time separating real environmental impact from what simply sounds good in a marketing campaign. And let me be clear, this is not anti-tree. The problem starts when tree planting becomes a substitute for reducing emissions at the source. In this video, I will show you 5 things: the maths problem, the honest failures, the carbon credit scandals, and the difference between carbon neutral and net zero, and why a pizza might explain the biggest problem with carbon neutrality better than any sustainability report. Because once you know what to look for, you stop being distracted by the tree and start asking what the company actually changed. The maths problem. You buy a pair of trainers. The brand says they plant a tree for every pair sold. That sounds simple enough. You buy the shoes, they plant the tree, and your carbon footprint is dealt with. But let me show you what that tree is actually doing. In its first 5 years, a freshly planted seedling absorbs almost nothing. Most of its energy goes into staying alive, growing roots, and building enough structure to survive. The serious carbon capture comes later. A tree at peak growth, somewhere around 10 to 30 years old, might absorb around 10 to 25 kilograms of CO2 per year. After that, as it reaches full size, the growth slows down, and so does the carbon intake. So you are not getting a straight line, you are getting a slow build, a peak, and a plateau. That matters because the emissions from your purchase happen now. The tree's carbon absorption happens later, much later. Now here is the problem. A standard pair of trainers produces around 14 kilograms of CO2 to manufacture. One healthy mature tree might absorb around 25 kilograms a year at peak growth. So in theory, yes, that one tree could cover the one pair of trainers, but not today, maybe in 15 years, if it is still alive. It is the right species. If nobody cuts it down, if it doesn't burn, if it gets enough water. That is the very different claim from this purchase has been offset. What it really means is we release the carbon now, and we are hoping a tree removes it later. Then scale that up. The UK produces around 364 million tons of CO2 per year. To offset that through tree planting alone, you would need billions of new trees planted and maintained continuously. Not once, every year, forever. Globally, if every business tried to offset through trees, the land needed would become absurd. Some estimates put the land required between 1.5 and 2 billion additional hectares. That is close to the scale of all current farmland. At that point, you are not solving a paperwork problem. You're choosing between land for trees and land for food. That is not a logistics issue. This is a physical limit. And that is before we look at what happens to the trees that have already been planted. Because even when people do everything right, the maths can still break. The honest failure. Jigsaw Farms, Australia. Now, this part is important because not every failed tree project is a scam. Some people are genuinely trying to do the right thing, and the model still fails them. Mark Wotton and Eve Cantor did not cut corners. At Jigsaw Farms in Victoria, Australia, they planted around 600,000 trees across 20% of their farm. They got independent certification. By 2011, the farm was officially declared carbon neutral and was being held up internationally as proof that farming and sustainability could work together. Then, by 2024, they were no longer carbon neutral. Not because they stopped caring, not because they were exposed as frauds, not because the trees disappeared. The problem was simpler than that. the trees got older. Young trees grow quickly, so they absorb more carbon as they build trunks, branches, leaves and roots. But once they reach full size, that appetite drops sharply. The trees at jigsaw farms hit that point. Their annual carbon absorption fell, while the sheep and cattle on the farm kept producing methane every single year. So the farm went from offsetting 100% of its emissions to covering around 70 to 80%. The land had reached its ceiling. There was no magic extra carbon storage left unless they planted a whole new forest or cut the herd. That is the part people miss. A tree is not a permanent vacuum cleaner for carbon. It is a living thing with a growth curve. At some point, it slows down. And if your emissions keep happening every year, but your trees stop increasing their absorption, the numbers stop balancing. The researchers who studied the project put it very directly. You cannot plant your way out of permanent pollution stream with a temporary carbon sponge. These were honest, committed people who did what the model asked of them. The model failed them anyway. That is what honest failure looks like. Now, let me show you what dishonest success looks like. The ghost forests. In 2023, The Guardian, Zeta Online and Source Material investigated Vera, the world's largest carbon credit certifier. Their finding was brutal. Many rainforest credits were effectively worthless, not because the forest did not exist, but because the threat to those forests had been overstated. In plain English, credits were being sold to protect land that was not actually at serious risks of being destroyed. So no extra carbon was being saved. The forest was real, but the reduction was mostly on paper. That same year, Bloomberg investigated the Kariba project in Zimbabwe run by the South Pole, one of the biggest names in the carbon offset industry. The project sold credits for 27 million tons of claimed CO2 saving. Gucci bought them, Volkswagen bought them. Both used credits like this as part of their carbon neutral claims. Bloomberg found that the project had massively overstated the impact. Again, the forests were real. The carbon savings were the problem. And in Australia, researchers examined 182 projects where landowners were paid carbon credits because native bush was supposed to grow back after reducing livestock grazing. Nearly 80% of those projects had negligible or negative impact on vegetation. More than 27 million credits had been issued for trees that were not growing. Ghost forest, certified, sold, used by brands to make products and businesses look cleaner than they really were. And this is where the whole thing becomes uncomfortable, because the average customer has no way to check this. You see the logo, you see the tree claim, you see the words carbon neutral. You assume someone somewhere has checked it properly. But the scandals keep showing the same pattern. The certificate can look more solid than the carbon saving behind it. And even when the forests are real, certified, genuinely growing, there is still a problem with the kind of trees companies often choose. The monoculture trap. Most corporate trees planting does not look like a natural forest. It often looks like one species planted in rows. Sitka spruce in Scotland, eucalyptus in Brazil, pine across southern Europe. Companies choose them because they grow quickly, they are cheap and they are easy to measure. But a single species plantation is not the same as a forest. A real forest has different tree species, plants, insects, birds, fungi, deadwood, soil life and roots all working together. That messiness is not a problem. It is what makes the system strong. A plantation is much weaker. One disease can move through it very quickly. One fire can take the whole thing. One drought can hit every tree at the same time because they all need similar conditions. It might look green from the sky, but does not mean it's healthy ecosystem. Portugal is a good example of why this matters. Millions of eucalyptus trees have burned in recent years through wildfires, releasing stored carbon back into the atmosphere within hours. Years of claimed carbon storage can disappear in one afternoon. And there is even a worse version of this. If trees are planted on land that was previously peatland or species-rich grassland, disturbing that soil can release more carbon than the new trees will ever absorb. So the project can end up doing the opposite of what it claims. The planting made these things worse. This is the bit that gets lost in the marketing. A tree is not automatically good for every place. The right tree in the right place, managed properly, can be brilliant. The wrong tree in the wrong place, planted for quick credits, can damage the very system it claims it helps. But let us say the species are right, the project is genuine, and the trees are growing well. There is still one more question almost nobody asks: the management gap. When a company buys carbon credits, the transaction is finished. The offset goes into this year's sustainability report. The website gets updated and the business moves on. But the trees have only just started their work. They may need 20, 30, 40, even 50 years to absorb that carbon they have already been credited for. And in many cases, there is no simple legal responsibility that follows the buyer if those trees die later. A new landowner can clear them. A drought can kill them. A wildfire can release the stored carbon in a single afternoon. When that happens, the company that sold the credits years earlier usually does not carry the liability. The offset has already been counted, the claim has already been made, the customer has already been reassured, and the carbon goes back into the atmosphere if the trees were never there. So what are we really doing? We are trading certain warming happening right now for uncertain cooling that might happen later, somewhere else, managed by someone else over the next half century. This is not a carbon strategy. It is a hope with a certificate attached to it. Most businesses using carbon credits are not trying to mislead people. Many have simply never been shown the full picture. And a big part of the confusion comes from two phrases that sound almost identical but mean very different things. Carbon neutral versus net zero. Spinach on a fat pizza. Carbon neutral and net zero sound similar, but they're not the same thing. And the gap between them explains almost everything. Imagine ordering a large pizza. Extra cheese, fatty meat, the full works. You know it is not great for you, so you put some spinach on half of it. Even a bit more. Does the spinach remove the calories? No. Does it remove the saturated fat? No. Does it undo what the pizza is doing to your body? Not at all. You still ordering it, you still ate it. The spinach is a decoration. Carbon neutral can work like that. A company keeps emitting CO2 today, this morning, right now, and then buys trees planting credits to make the numbers balance out immediately. The tree, if it survives and grows properly, might absorb the equivalent amount later. So we create certain damage now, then bet on uncertain repair in the future. Net zero is different. Proper net zero means changing the recipe. It means reducing actual emissions first, usually by 90 to 95%, and only using carbon removal for the small amount that genuinely cannot be eliminated. That difference is huge. Carbon neutral often asks, what can we offset? Real net zero asks, what we can stop emitting in the first place. And that is the question businesses are now being forced to answer. Not how many trees did you buy, not how nice is your sustainability page. What did you actually reduce? So, what does changing the recipe actually looks like in practice? This is where the pizza example becomes useful once more. What real sustainability looks like. Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3. Let us stay in the kitchen. You're in a pizzeria and you want to genuinely reduce your carbon footprint, not offset it, actually reduce it. The emissions comes from three places. The first is burning in your oven. The gas, the direct heat, the smoke you can smell. In business terms, this is Scope 1. It covers the fuel your vehicles burn, the gas heat in your building, and the equipment running on site. Fixing this means replacing it with something that produces less or produces nothing. not paying someone to plant a tree somewhere else. Scope 1 also includes leaks from fridges and air conditioning units. These refrigerant gases can be hundreds of times more damaging to the atmosphere than CO2, and most businesses have never properly measured them. The second is the electricity powering your oven. You might not be burning gas directly, but the grid that's supplying your kitchen still has a carbon cost. In business terms, this is scope 2. Switching to verified renewable energy removes that at the source permanently with no credits and no trees required. The third is everything else in that pizza. The flour, the cheese, the tomatoes, the delivery driver, the packaging, every supplier in the chain and every customer who uses what you sell. This is scope 3. For most businesses, it is where the majority of the footprint sits. Fixing scope 3 means changing how you buy, how you package, how you transport, and what you produce. It is the hardest part. It is also the part that makes the biggest difference. This is what real sustainability looks like. It is not glamorous, it is not usually a beautiful photo of someone holding a seedling. It is operations, procurement, energy, water, transport, refrigerants, product design, supplier choices. That sounds less exciting than planting trees, but it is where the real work actually happens. When a supplier tells you they are carbon neutral, ask one question. What are your scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 reduction targets? Not what are you offsetting, what are you actually reducing? Trees can help repair damage. They cannot be used as an excuse to keep creating it. If you want more content like this, evidence-based, no greenwashing, just what is actually going on, subscribe. And if you run a business and don't know where to start with sustainability, there is a link in the description. Come and talk to me. I'm Anthony from EcoDrift. Thanks for watching.